People of the world, welcome to Send It Rising Live. This the 358th episode of the show. Did you know that I've got this little book in my library where this gentleman, this interesting marketing gentleman, will take podcast interviews and turn them into a book. And I've known him for many years now, but it's been a while since we had a chance to sit down and chat. And backstage, we were having a conversation about, I don't know, Buddhism and enlightenment and how we perceive our thoughts and the thoughts that come into our heads. And do you have an internal monologue? I have an internal monologue, but I can turn mine off. I have an internal monologue, but I can't turn mine off. Do you have an internal monologue? I'm curious to know. Leave a comment. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go deep with our guest today. He is the founder of Done For You Podcasting. That's dfypodcast.com. Check him out. Host of the Marketer of the Day podcast, marketeroftheday.com, and an author of a whole bunch of books. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, the one, the only, Robert Plank.
All right, it's party
Mr.
time.
Plank. Yeah, let's go. So you are with child.
Yeah, that sounds weird saying it like that, but yeah, okay.
Right? And the game has changed a bit. Do you have a different perspective on, say, employees or people that you've worked with in the past now that you have a kid? Does that make sense? Like when you engage with other business owners and entrepreneurs that have they're like, 5 children. Do you see their life differently now that you are a father with a 19-month-old?
I mean, I guess, I tried, when someone says, I have 5 children, I know a couple of guys with 12, and I try to not think too much about that because it starts to hurt my brain, even managing that. It's hard enough to deal with one, right? And when someone has 5 kids, I'm like, how do they even know if each one has their shoes on, each one is fed, what's the names? So I try to not think too deeply about what they have going on. But as far as me and being selfish in a healthy way, Mike's son was born in May of last year, and then in around May 2 years ago. It all runs together. So he was born 2 years ago in May, and then that same year in November was when I kind of went on a not like a hiring spree, but I slowly began to build a team. And I think that I realized, kind of to your point there, that there was only one of me and there were all these other obligations, even with one kid piling on. And I needed to have other people on the team, knowing that it was not all going to be smooth, knowing that in a way you're kind of trading one set of problems for another set of problems. But since the baby's born, there's been a lot of shorter windows of time. I can't necessarily sit down and think for 6 hours straight. There's been a lot of tapping on a message on the phone, hopping on the Slack channel, hopping on the Asana channel, and now I'm up to 10 full-time employees. And I think that kind of what put the wheels in motion was the baby being born and just knowing that some of the time would have to be subtracted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's quite a change. 10 full-time employees. Where were you 2 years ago? How many full-time employees?
2 years ago, there were 2 part-time.
Oh, wow. So who's selling? Who's making the deals? Is it you? Is it you plus others?
Just me still. And I know that's in the future, it needs to not be me, but for now, I'm kind of more of the salesperson, and the employees are the ones doing the work.
Mm-hmm. And is it the podcast? Is it networking groups? First of all, what's the product? Are we doing digital marketing, or are we selling podcast consulting? What are we selling here?
The bulk of it is podcast production, so that's 80% of it, and then 80% of the 80% is podcast notes. And so what happens is, you have your 358 podcast episodes, or your live streams here. I have 850 podcast episodes. Some of us have all this content, right? You're the SEO guy, and so we have all this content that needs editing, put into little clips, show notes written, so that way there's blog posts. So there's basically whole full days where we can keep these people busy listening to people's podcasts, creating social graphics, finding the relevant links, URLs, figuring out titles for episodes. So they do a lot of different things, but the bulk of it is podcast production, and the bulk of that is podcast show notes.
I love that. So, what's the SEO argument in your mind as to embedding, say, the YouTube version of the show into a website as a blog post?
The SEO argument is that we want to make Google happy, right? And if we just have just a title or just a title and the audio clip, how helpful is that? And how easily can Google and those search engines, like, show up in the search results? And I know that there's so many times when I want to find some answers to some question, and I go and I'll find some podcaster, and maybe if I'm lucky, there'll be a transcript that I have to dig through. But so many times I just want to go, and maybe I want to listen to something in the background and figure out what the link is or figure out what the quote is. I don't have that much time to listen to like a 2-hour episode to figure out the answer to my problem. And so the podcast notes are great for if you're in a hurry and you want to just like get to the author's website, or you want to just kind of figure out what are the talking points. And depending on whose podcast it is, how they like the template, it might say like, well, at 6 minutes and 30 seconds, this is where we talked about Buddhism, about the internal monologue. And so we can just like jump to that part of the audio. And as you know, from the SEO point of things, Google likes it when you answer the question, right? And so if someone has that search phrase, and if you end up being the one that looks like it has the answer and you get the click, Google gives you that boost. And then if they end up on your website, and because of the combination of the audio and the show notes, they find the answer and they don't click back, then Google rewards that too. So there's my SEO argument, that because you have those kind of developed blog posts, show notes, podcast notes, then you get more of the clicks off of the Google search results, and then there's no clicking back, and then you get penalized that way.
Yeah, I mean, the auto caption feature on YouTube alone is fascinating to me. And auto captions have gotten so strong. They're on TikTok, they're on Facebook, they're everywhere. That technology is out there. Does your team go through and edit them and make them pretty, capitalize, punctuation, that sort of thing, and then post them beneath the embedded YouTube video, for example?
So we don't do that much with the captions, with the word for
Okay.
word. We do the podcast notes. So say there's like a 20-minute episode. There might
Hmm.
be like a page, or like 2/3 of a page of the most important things, like maybe like 300 words, 500 words or so, of like, here's the guest bio, here's what we're talking about, here's a breakdown
Hmm.
of, we said this at minute 5, this at minute 10, here are the relevant quotes, here are the relevant links. So not so much a word for word transcript, but more of like a summary of like what it all means together.
Oh, I love that. That's so strong. And to be quite honest with you, I have not done that for my show, but it's a good idea. And for those of you sitting there going, "Yeah, I should do that," it's a lot of work. That's the secret sauce of most service-based companies that I've realized over the years, is that whatever they're doing is one, it's not easy, and two, and it's time consuming. And so, yes, that is something that I'd consider doing. But yeah, I can imagine just how much work that is for you and your team. Also, obviously, how many podcasts people are doing is going to factor into that. So, do you have folks, by and large, that are doing it once a week, 5 days a week? How often are folks producing content? It's all over the place, right? But on average.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like on average, once or twice a week is what it feels like, just like looking at all the different clients. But sometimes people come to us, and like the one guy in particular, he said, I have 129 YouTube videos. Go back and make the podcast notes, make me some tweets for each episode, make me a promotional email, and take each of these old YouTube videos and like repackage it and drip it out as a podcast. So even some of these people say, I have just a whole pile of content. And the good news is it's not too late. And even like me and my hundreds of episodes, just like you, I have my team going back, and maybe not necessarily from the beginning in sequential order, but I'll just say, go and choose a random episode and go fix up the recording, make some podcast notes, make some Instagram graphics with the guest photo and like some quotes from the guest and their URL. And then that's an excuse to go back and follow up with the guest later on and say, hey, remember our or interview 4 years ago or 2 years ago. Well, now here is some new, fresh, social media content created for it. Here's a copy and paste email you can send to your list and kind of breathe fresh life into it. A lot of these people, I feel like the average is once, maybe twice a week. But even if there's a lot of backdated content, and if it's just sitting there and it's maybe not giving you the traffic that it used to, now you can get a little bit more of a boost because you can make it fresh again.
Yeah, I love that. I was flirting with doing advertisements on Spotify or something. I mean, what is podcast pay per click? Does it exist? Where can you advertise these things? Can you just pay for views?
I mean, I've never, whenever I've gotten into that, I've never had a lot of luck, and some of that scares me. Like, I don't know if you've seen some of these dudes. They'll place like a mid roll ad, and they'll spend like $10,000-$20,000 to get a spot on, like Comedy Bang Bang or some like huge podcast or something. And I'm like,
Mhm.
that seems like a huge risk to like throw all this money at it and just hope for something else. And like kind of, and my strategy is to kind of treat it like anything else, treat it like any other sort of creating content, SEO. And I'm thinking, well, if there's like you and me here on this video recording, then there's all the ways to recycle it, right? You have the put it on YouTube, put it on
Mhm.
the on iTunes, get the little clips made. So I have not had any luck for very long with doing any kind of like pay-per-click ads with podcasting, and I'd rather just build the content and kind of do it more of the old-fashioned way, right? Of create the email sequence, follow up with the guests, post on social media, all the things that they work, but it's slow. But if you're consistent, but if you have the team, the employees to put in the hours that you don't necessarily want to do, then that's kind of a machine that keeps on running.
Mhm. Yeah. I think the email bit is a weakness of mine, because I'm not really following up via email with guests that have been on the show. I could. I've got the database, got everyone in there, to reach back out to them, that sort of stuff. I know that there's a number of things I could be doing better, and two of them are what you just mentioned, an email list, and the second would be doing show notes and getting them up on the website with more consistency. Um, what do you think about Buzzsprout? Have you heard of Buzzsprout?
Yeah, I mean, as far as just hosting the podcast, or there are other features.
Yeah, it's like all I know. So I've been using it, and it just auto delivers it to 12 or so podcast platforms, right? So Deezer and iTunes and Spotify. It's just all over the place, right? But in my experience, the pandemic brought about everybody's got a podcast. Everyone's grandma has a podcast. So there's so much like market saturation right now. And so I'm just thinking to myself, what can I do? What can I do? This is what every podcaster thinks about all the time to grow the audience. Um, are the strategies you just mentioned the tried and true methods of doing that?
I mean, I think that so the whole concept of you post your podcast episode and it ends up on all the other places. I mean, that's just the modern day version of submitting to the manually submitting to search engines. Remember those days of like going to
Right,
like add
right.
me and saying like, let me submit to Excite, let me submit to DMOZ, and all those other places, which is like a good thing to do. But I've had the most success with going back through that list of podcast guests and kind of treating them as the multipliers, because like, I mean, I've had some
Mhm.
guests run Facebook ads for their appearance on my show, and I'm thinking like, well, cool, I don't want to bother, or I've never really had that much luck with running my own Facebook ads, so this person who's on it is running his own ads to it. And as you mentioned earlier, you and me are in a book together. And why is that? Because I
Mhm.
went back through that spreadsheet of all the guests and kind of had an offer for them, and just went through a few every day. And so yeah, like it's like that kind of John D. Rockefeller quote of, well, I could do 100% of my work, or I could have 100 people do 1%. That's kind of my
Mhm.
thinking, is all these other people have their own lists, their own social media following, their own kind of goofy traffic methods. I'd rather have 358 different people promoting their episode of my podcast than try to figure out one way of getting all my episodes working, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make perfect sense. What it did is it sparked an idea in my head of putting it more on a silver platter. I think that was one of the things I remember from an email that you sent me that was but first and foremost, if you've never received an email from Robert Plank, make sure you get onto some sort of email list or whatever. Because I remember being impressed by it, and going, "Oof, that's a lot of work." Because I want to say, and this is years ago, so tell me if I'm wrong about this, but you detailed like all the ways that you could share it. I think there were emails that came before the appearance, emails that came after the appearance. I mean, it's like a whole system. And I have that for internet marketing, right? So if you're a local plumber, an electrician, or whatever, we got your Google post figured out. We got all your Yoast on-site SEO. We can build a gorgeous website. We got the blogging thing covered. We got Google ads. You want to do LinkedIn ads, Facebook ads, like that I've got locked in and systematized, right? Because that's the company I happen to own. But I do not have that on the podcast side. And so it's interesting to watch your methodology and see it working. It's just not something I've ever done. And so when I see it, I'm intimidated by it. I'm like, oh, it's so much work. Like you've got you know what I mean? Just all of those touch points. But it's clearly the better way of doing it.
Well, and I mean, and you have to start somewhere. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have all the touch points set up in advance, and even and sometimes I'll have guests that kind of fall off the sequence, or I won't necessarily stay on top of the spreadsheet like 100% of the time. But even if you follow up, weeks later, months later, that's more than most people do. I mean, I've been on so many
Right.
shows where I'm like, did the show even go live? And years pass, and I even completely forgot. So it's never too late. Even if you have that list of all those people who were guests of yours, then you can still follow up. And a kind of a secret that blew my mind is most of us use Gmail, right? And
Oh yeah.
Gmail has this little hidden area in the settings called a delegate. And you can say, I'm Robert Plank at Gmail, and I can specify Kellen Kautzman at Gmail as someone who can sort of log into my Gmail account. And it kind of like
Okay.
links them in a way. And so you can have an employee, have a virtual assistant where you can give them this special access, and they kind of authenticate in their Google account, but they can kind of just like switch over to like sort of like switching a tab, and they can be in your inbox. And so you don't necessarily have to have some kind of crazy system. You can just say, I have my Gmail account, and it's, as you know, it's, you can't really like share Gmail passwords because it tries to like, link up the phones and stuff like that. But you can say, I grant this person access to my Gmail account, and then they can just start sending in a few emails a day, just following back up with people who were guests. And I think that what makes it work really well is that it's like it's emailing from Gmail. We're not talking about like a email blast. It's kind of like doing it the slow hard way. And I tell
Okay,
my
I see what
people,
you're saying.
and I'll be like, well, I'll be like, I want you to send this message. For example, I'll say, it's been a few years since you've been on the show. Would you like to come back? And I'll say, here's the message I want you to send. And I'll have them go into my Gmail and find the existing email chain, the existing conversation, and say, send this chunk of message, and maybe personalize it with their name or the link to their show. But it's like a few messages a day, and it takes maybe like a month or so to get these hundreds of messages sent out, and it's a little bit more slow going, but I think it's a lot more effective than an email blast with like an unsubscribe link and things like that. It's kind of like doing the grinding, the hard work, but that's okay because someone else is putting in the time, right?
Yeah, no, I love that. That's so good. So the strategy, to sum up, is give delegate access to your email so you can send personalized messages to folks that have been on the show to get them back.
Yes.
Which is a great strategy. I mean, I could go and I could do that. I mean, I'm spending a lot of my time focused on the show and a lot of my headspace. I like that strategy. To be honest with you, as someone who was Mr. SEO forever, public speaker, that sort of stuff, my email like list game is non-existent. Like MailChimp, I can log in and I can put something together. I can probably blast something out, but that's, you know what I mean? The change, the drip sequence, the like every 2 weeks they get this new emails before they getting them into the list, all that. I never played in that space ever. Um, I was always, I'm going to write an article and try to rank in Google. That was the vibe for years and years and years. And then, I look up one day and I'm like, oh, I own an agency. Okay. And there's all these people that have these skills. And, so I know email is a big deal. And a good friend of mine, Roy Nakamura, he's a huge believer in it. He's like, email lists are not dead. Don't think they are. There's a million different cool ways you can leverage them. And, so that's where I think you've got like if we were a basketball team, that would be your like good 3-point shot. Like I think you've got that on lock. You know what I mean?
And it's like I'm not even like that great at it. Like as you kind of imagine there, I mentioned there are people out there that have whole sequences, and it's like if they stop responding to this, it drops them into this other subsequence, and there's like split testing, and
Oh, wild.
so much of that drives me crazy. And I'm thinking like, well, let me make sure that like ideally I want to send a blast every day. And
Right.
I used to be really on point with that. Now it's probably like 3, 4 times a week. But I'm thinking like the goal to hit if is 7 days a week, 5 days a week, every single day, sending out some kind of a blast. And I sometimes I'll go and I'll make like sort of like a 5 or a 10 day sequence, but I don't go much further than that. And the reason for that is that once like if I spend all this time making this whole sequence and it sits there for 6 months, 12 months, after a while it gets sort of old and there's like old offers and old messages and it might be look dated. And after a while it's time to just tear it down and recreate it. So I feel like
Right.
these people that have these whole crazy sequences, either it's all they do or they have like a full-time person on staff where it's
Yep.
all they do. It's
Yep.
like just to be the email drip sequence. So if you don't have that kind of full-time kind of person, then I think kind of a compromise to make with yourself is just like send a blast on some sort of regular basis. And even if it's like once a week, like here's our latest show or here's my some kind of offer, that's doable. And then something that also helps me get into the headspace is if I think, well, can I schedule things in advance for something like once a month for like 4 months. So say you have like a course that you offer or like an affiliate link, something that you're an affiliate for. It's not that hard to just whip out 4 quickie emails. And like email number one can be just like, something that's maybe like 4 sentences and saying like, here's a few sentences leading up to clicking this link. Email number two could be you go to the landing page that you're promoting, whatever it is, and pull out some of the copy, like pull out some bullet points and then have a link at the end. And then email 3 and 4 can just be like, hey, click this link. Hey, did you see this? It doesn't have to be like these big old long pages. And so just like sometimes it's easy to just kind of get that in your head of just thinking like, well, I could do 4 quick emails and space them out like a month apart in advance from now. And then if I do nothing else between now and then, at least those 4 emails will be sent out. And if I have time later on, then in between, I can kind of have other broadcasts in there. So like I'm more of a broadcast guy and less of a sequence guy, but I do little sequences sometimes.
Yeah, it is so fascinating to me when worlds merge, because you live in somewhat of well, I shouldn't say somewhat. You're like podcast land, right? You live in podcasteria. It's a fictional place with unicorns, and I live in, I don't know, digital marketing land. And these two worlds, it seems like they're the same. They're so different. It's like anything. Like in chess, you can study unopening and play unopening your entire life, right? You can like study the nuances of the London system. It's this move, that move, this move, and like the way it progresses like scatters out into like infinities. It's wild. um, and when people hear digital marketing or marketing, they everything gets lumped into that package. But Google Ads is so different from LinkedIn ads, like just completely different worlds. And then so we're talking about podcasting and email in the same in the context of like getting a podcast to work. Um, and it to me it's like plumber, electrician. Can you fix my fence? It's like, no, we know that we don't, like. And that's what's so fascinating about the digital space to me. Like I will try to acquire a new skill, and to get into the nuance of it requires so much energy. TikTok is what I'm doing right now. I'm just every day I'm doing a TikTok, right? And the subtleties, the culture, the choices that people are making, it's wild. Have you ever played in that space? Like gotten into TikTok?
I don't post on TikTok, but I keep up with like some of like the short content that's real popular now. Like the Instagram Reels show up on
Mm,
Facebook a lot for me, which is kind of like, as you know, it's sort of their copycat of that. And I keep
yep.
watching to be like, okay, like what are they doing? Because like sometimes they'll have these like 30-second clips and they'll pack so much into it. And they'll have like jokes and they'll have words and they'll throw up little like, little bits of text here and there, and they'll have like one guy's talking like this and the other guy's
Yeah.
talking like that, and I'm like, they
Yeah.
pack like 10 minutes worth in the 30 seconds, and I'm like, maybe I'm too old because I'm trying to get my head wrapped around that of just like,
Yeah.
and they'll do it every day, and I'll be like almost like looking forward to it, and I'll feel like I miss it if I go a day or two without seeing this one financial guy with like, he's like, oh, he's
Yeah.
talking on the phone and he's talking on the phone, and it's like, how do these kids do it? Like, it's I think I get what you mean about just like kind of trying to absorb it and kind of tapping into just how it evolves, because like it seems like every week it's like totally different.
It's wild. I suggested that my sister, who owns Chelsea Smith Cosmetics, get into TikTok, and she made $50,000 off of a TikTok live like a month ago selling wigs. And so I mean, she's like famous now. It's wild. And she was doing real well prior to that, but TikTok just exploded her popularity. And so I was like, well, I should start. Like she's my sister. Can't get closer than that. So like if she's got the ability to do it, I do. And
And and
so
and you
yeah, I
know what?
started.
But
And
but
go
I've
ahead.
but I've heard that like it's a lot of it's like what matches your personality too. Like some people
Oh
love
yeah.
TikTok, some people love Clubhouse, and I think that the mistake is trying to be in like six different platforms. So I like what you're. I don't mean to interrupt, but I like what you're doing of you saying like, I'm committing to TikTok because it
Yep.
sort of fits, and I'm not going to be doing TikTok plus 8 different things. It's like, this is what my current sort of recurring focus is.
Yeah, and and the reason I'm addicted to it is because the numbers are actually decent. I got like 5,000 views, 1,600, and then I average anywhere from like 2 to 400. And I just do quick little social media news. That's it. Just social media news. Hey, Google did this, Facebook did that, TikTok did this. And I'm already getting trolls, man. I got trolls saying horrifying things to me.
You're doing something
And I'm
right.
like, oh, yo, these celebrities, I can imagine, like, I am a nobody. And like, I'm like an F-list celebrity, but I can not imagine being like a B-lister or A-lister. Like, just the torrent of ignorance they must like just, shield themselves against is wild, dude. It's wild. So
Well,
more
like
power to them.
you think about like when you and me were kids, there's like, bullying all in school, and then nowadays
Yeah.
it's like, well, the in-person bullying is kind of really not tolerated, at least from my understanding. But it's all gone to the internet, so it's like the bullying hasn't gone away. It's all just been focused online instead.
Oh, and I mean, insecure, fearful people plus anonymity equals a nightmare. It's just wild.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. I don't know if it'll have to do with anonymity online, but we'll get there. But I still believe the internet's a miracle, and I think it's a price well worth paying. But yeah, I definitely got to keep an eye on my kids' phones. Ladies and gentlemen, 10:59. We're going to wrap up the show. I want to make sure that Robert has a chance to tell you about what he's up to. What a phenomenal guest. Mr. Plank, why don't you tell the fine folks where they can reach you?
You can reach me on my podcast. It's at marketeroftheday.com, which Kellen Counson was a guest years ago, and we'll have to have him back. And as he mentioned, he's in a book that we created from it, also called Marketer of the Day, which you can find on Amazon at motdbook.com. So the podcast is marketeroftheday.com. The service, if you'd like to have a podcast created, if it's new, you want us to take it over, you want us to make it easier for you, you want us to go back and create the show notes out of the old episodes, whatever it is, that's at dfypodcast.com. And then the book, because you always have to have a book, right? The book is WWHWbook.com. And the idea for the book is that any type of content that you create, whether it's TikTok, podcast, live stream, blog post, whatever, it needs to go in this sequence for like maximum effectiveness for your audience and for you to have fun creating it. Why, what, how to, what if. So the book is WWHWbook.com. The service is DFYpodcast.com. The podcast is marketeroftheday.com.
Let's go. And folks, take Robert up on these offers. Go to these websites because he's the real deal. Imagine, dedicating your life to podcasting for many years. You're going to walk away from it with a lot of understanding. So thank you, Robert, for being a guest on the show. Genuinely appreciate it. And we'll see y'all next time.